Welcome to Own Damn Guru podcast, where I aim to create an overview of a soul's journey through the human experience and beyond for you to get a better understanding of yourself and your own journey and eventually become your own damn guru. Hi, and welcome back. Hopefully, the first episode wasn't too overwhelming with information or triggers around what was relayed. And if it was, then that was exactly the way it was supposed to be for you. I'd love to hear what was awakened within you, so feel free to reach out and share. This episode is going to be around wounds and the hold they have on us and our lives. So we're going to dig a bit deeper and explore how they arise, what our reactions to them are, and the impact they carry throughout our lives. So, we have already stated that the wounds are created in our childhood, whether we remember it or not. Regardless of your belief or idea that you have around having a good upbringing, you might be thinking, I had a roof over my head, caretakers that loved me, food on the table, lots of friends, and had a lot of fun in a safe environment. There wasn't any abuse or directly challenging or harmful situations. Or you might understand straight away how wounded you've been throughout your entire childhood. Regardless of how you perceive your childhood, you have been wounded. Take that in for a second. You have been wounded. You have wounds within you right now that are in need of healing. Please give compassion to whatever comes up because our body knows. By me just stating this fact, emotions can arise. It took a long while for me in my healing process to acknowledge this fact. Because if we accept that, are we then saying our caretakers were bad? That they didn't love us enough? That they didn't do a good job? I think it's safe to say that every, and then I mean every, human being is doing the best they can with what they have at the given moment. Nonetheless, we are all flawed, wounded human beings that until we stop and take a look at our wounds are going to continue living from a place where they run the show. There's a common saying that goes, if you never heal what hurt you, you will bleed on people that didn't cut you. In other words, the wounds are going to continue to run the show through your ego that is trying its best to protect the wounds until we heal them, until we heal our inner child. To do so, we need to become the parent that our inner child needs in order to be free from what is being held on to. Wounds are portrayed differently by different teachers and within different teachings. I'm going to go with rejection, betrayal, abandonment, humiliation, and injustice as portrayed by Lisa Bourbeau. But there are others that talk, for example, about father or mother wounds, etc. They are all just an effort of trying to put the core issues into examples and clearer boxes for our minds to comprehend. The core issues are always some form of emotional, physical, or psychological neglect or even abuse, which occur through our caretakers' actions or lack thereof, and can lead to disconnection to self and others, diminished sense of self-worth, and the inability to love yourself and others. disconnection from your body, poor self regulation, high anxiety and recurring depression, deep seated feelings of loneliness, shame, guilt, and anger, not being able to express your emotions in a healthy way, or even repressing them, and so on and so forth. These states are usually caused by our caretakers punishing, gaslighting, shaming, yelling, insulting, name calling, body shaming, not respecting boundaries, not showing affection, verbal, physical, sexual abuse, not being present or involved, and so on. But many times it can also be in the more subtle ways, like when your caretaker's not taking notice when you're trying to get their attention because they're always preoccupied with something else, like their phone, work, or their to do lists. Or you being belittled or not believed when sharing something true and important to you. When this trust is broken, we get hurt and wounded deeply. It can also be things such as parentification, where a child has to step in and become the parent to the parent. Sometimes it's not even about what is done to us directly, but what you experience in your home environment. Like if one of your caretaker is mistreating someone else in your household. As previously mentioned, the more clear-cut cases with downright abuse are sometimes easier to understand. There might be visual, physical bruises on the outside of the body or a total absent caretaker, which is sometimes easier to understand than the more subtle cases where there's lower grade, everyday emotional neglect, where you, for example, are never allowed to express your feelings. Nonetheless, it can hurt us as children equally deeply. Another important point to make is that I use the word caretaker for a reason. That's because it doesn't matter if the person that took care of you is your biological father or mother. If a biological parent was absent, you can both be wounded by their absence and the one who actually took care of you on a day-to-day basis. There can also be close family members or other key people in our lives that we trust the most. And when that trust is broken, wounds are created. Later on in life, there might be people that inflict pain on us, and we endure other traumas that we need to heal. But I would say that these are in another category that either just triggers the already existing core wounds or are separate traumas that, of course, also need healing, but they aren't pivotal and crucial to our navigation of life and our subconscious patterning in the same way as these core wounds that are created in the very early formative years of our life. As I've already said, we all are wounded on some level. We come from a place where unconditional love is the frequency, and everything lower than that is going to wound us. I already have, and I'm going to continue to wound my own daughter. Even though that was one of the first things I wanted to control when realizing this whole wound thing. But I have to accept that. The only question was on what level and to what degree. That was up to me. This is where the ancestral aspect comes in. Many talk about traits within families, about things sitting in their DNA. Regardless of how it actually works on an energetic and scientific level, the mechanisms are clear. People tend to subconsciously behave, act, and later on parent as they themselves have been when they grew up, even when it's wrong. I can promise you that there are so many kids that grow up being abused and thinking they would never do that to someone else. And then they end up doing that exact same thing to their own children later on. Because if we don't heal what hurt us, we will bleed on people that didn't cut us. There are many scientific explanations about how this occurs through epigenetics. In other words, we don't only take on the actions of our closest caretaker, but also their feelings and their state of being is ingrained within us. Since we, especially as small children, are extremely susceptible to the energies around us. So the war that your grandmother's mother experienced is within you. The racial injustices of a group is felt not only through actions directed towards you in this life, but also through your epigenetics. The historical gender inequality isn't just about a male colleague getting a higher raise. We as women feel these things on a way deeper level than could ever be explained with words. This is why we need to break the chains, break the cycles, decide that it ends here by you doing the work. If you are in some way, shape, or form hurt by your childhood, which you are, that was a rhetorical question, don't you dare pass that along to your innocent children knowingly. Don't you dare. This is also the way we change the world and all the atrocities in it. It all starts with you, with me, with us. The macrocosmos around you is just a reflection of the microcosmos within you. The same wars that are being waged around you are the same wars that you wage inside of you. Far-fetched, one might think, but it's actually not. People are not born bad. They are wounded, fear-based, programmed, ego-driven, and in lack-focused survival mode. So they end up doing things from that place. From a higher perspective, there actually isn't such a thing as good or bad. The person that broke up with you might just be that thing that taught you to set boundaries and make you claim your self-love and self-worth just so you can call in and attract the love of your life. It might be hard to see at the time when it's happening, but as you evolve, you'll come faster and faster into observer point, into 0 point, into the state of knowing that you are not your feelings and thoughts, and realize that our circumstances are not punishments. They are lessons that we contracted and attracted. It's only when you put meaning into a situation that it becomes what you perceive as good or bad. It's how we respond to something that dictates the level of victimhood that we drown in or the glory we hold from the lesson learned. Through responding by rising above the circumstances, through learning the lesson and evolving. Without my hardships, I would have never awakened to the higher perspectives of life. Today, I'm so grateful for them. It took me some time, but since I got there, it's been such a blessing. So let's get a bit better acquainted with the 5 core wounds as Lisa portrays them. From here on out, there will be references to the caretaker of the same or opposite sex. but essentially it refers to the mother or father figure in your life. First up, we have rejection. The wound of rejection is created the earliest in life, before we are 1 year old, by the caretaker of the same sex. It can happen in cases where the biological parent didn't plan for our arrival, had conflicting feelings about our arrival, didn't prefer our gender for some potentially cultural reason, had to give us up due to financial or social circumstances. If they themselves suffer from the rejection wound and pass it on to us, or any more subtle version of rejection that was enough for us to feel rejected. As Gabor Mate puts it, it's not about what happened to you, it's what happened inside of you as a result of what happened to you. The experienced rejection creates a deep-rooted feeling of not being worthy to exist, not being worthy to receive, to be loved, to get attention, and ultimately, we reject ourselves. One that suffers from the wound of rejection want to save themselves from being rejected even further, so they tend to wear a mask of a withdrawer. One that tries to hide away and not be seen. They make themselves appear small in all the ways through their appearance, body, voice. They also tend to be up in the clouds, very dissociated and not very grounded. Instead of being, they become very focused on what they do and want to do that perfectly, which can make it take longer than necessary, which opens up for even further rejection. So the fear of rejection actually becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy and a magnet for even more rejection until they stop and all the rejections make them see what needs healing in the core of themselves. The masks are not always worn. Many times we tend to go in and out of them depending on our state. If we are triggered and in victimhood, we tend to wear the masks. You might have felt cool, calm, collected 1 minute, and then something happens that triggers you, and all of a sudden, you don't recognize yourself or react and act in a way that you're not proud of. Next up is abandonment. This wound is inflicted between 1 and 3 years old by the caretaker of the opposite sex. It's caused when we feel that there has been a lack of affection shown or the wrong type of affection shown, like smothering or controlling. As with the rejection wound, it can be caused by both bigger events, but also the more subtle day-to-day happenings. It can be your caretaker abandoning you for months of work in another city, your sibling arriving to the world that is in need of extra attention or care, your caretaker being hospitalized and therefore all of a sudden is gone without you understanding why. Whatever reason the wound has for entering your life, it doesn't necessarily have to do with the caretaker's ill intent. The importance is in the feeling that arises within the child in question. When this wound has been inflicted, it creates a person that wears the mask of the dependent, that have a need to attach, craves help from others, always want more, make people feel sad about them. Sadness is one of the biggest and strongest feelings for them. Both sadness and happiness are a felt responsibility that goes both ways in any relationship with a dependent. Separation anxiety is common, strong victimhood mentality, and so on. At the core of it all lies self-resentment. The deeper the wound, the more the person abandons themselves, situations, or projects. They blame others for what they do themselves but don't want to see. Yet again, a self fulfilling prophecy when attracting situations where there is abandonment until we heal the root cause. The third one is humiliation. This wound is awakened if we want to continue exploring the option of us deciding on our contracts of what we're supposed to heal and experience upon incarnating here. Then this wound is awakened between the ages of 1 and 3 by a caretaker of any sex. This wound is tightly knit together with feeling ashamed, especially around something on a physical level, like your body, or a physical action, like wetting yourself, not keeping yourself clean, and so on. The wound is especially triggered when the child hears the caretaker telling someone else what happened. The feeling of their caretaker being ashamed of them fortifies the wound as the caretaker humiliates them. The child that experiences humiliation will create the mask of the masochist, one that almost takes pleasure in suffering, controls everything to avoid shame, takes up a lot of space, both in actions and in body stature. They take on a lot from others around them. It's in their doing and having that they compensate in this world, but also where the biggest triggers occur. Masochists enslave themselves by helping others all the time without healthy boundaries and are often left feeling taken advantage of when not appreciated. What they don't realize is that by doing everything for others, they make others feel they couldn't do it on their own, thus humiliating them. Which then brings us to the self fulfilling prophecy of endless humiliation loops until the core wound is healed. Next up is betrayal. This wound is awakened between the ages of 2 and 4 and is experienced with the caretaker of the opposite sex. This wound is often created around broken trust and promises, both big ones and small ones. It can also appear in cases where a caretaker of the same sex is betrayed by the caretaker of the opposite sex. Then the child can feel it as if it happened to them. In more severe cases where sexual abuse is present, the wound of the betrayal is always involved. With this wound comes the mask of the controller, with the intention of making themselves reliable, faithful, and responsible, or to make sure other people of the opposite sex keep their commitments. This can be compared to the mask of the masochist from the rejection wound, where the driving force behind the control is to avoid feeling ashamed of themselves or others feeling ashamed of them, whereas the controller's driving force is to make sure everyone keeps their commitments. Controllers believe that they are responsible and force themselves to keep promises. They believe that they are right and try to convince others about it. They can be charming and charismatic. They want to be special and important. They have a very high expectation on themselves and others. They can be very intolerant and want things to go fast. They achieve in life in order to be seen and don't like to open up or show vulnerability, because then someone might control them. And as always, this impossibly high standard kept towards others is kept on themselves and also attracts people that keep that high standard towards them, thus again creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of being and feeling betrayed, separated, and cast aside until the core wound is healed. Last but not least, we have the wound of injustice, which is awakened by the time we develop our individuality, which is roughly between the ages of 3 and 5, and is experienced primarily by the caretaker of the same sex. When that caretaker is unable to feel or express feelings, traits such as coldness, frequent criticism, strictness, intolerance, and conformity are often displayed. We suffer from injustice when we feel we aren't appreciated at our true value, when we don't feel respected, or when we don't believe we receive what we deserve. When faced with injustice, the reaction is to cut ourselves off from our feelings, thus believing that we are protecting ourselves. But we aren't. Even if we cut ourselves off from something, that doesn't mean we don't feel it. And therefore, creating the mask of the rigid. Rigid people are actually very sensitive, but they develop a capacity to bury their sensitivity and hide it from others. They act as if nothing touches them. That's why, if wearing the rigid mask, we often seem to be cold and insensitive. Rigid people seek justice and fairness above all. They are perfectionists, believing that if what they say or do is perfect, it will automatically be just. It's very difficult for them to understand that they are acting according to their definition of perfection, and they may still be unfair. Rigid people are often overly optimistic to problems with a no problem attitude in their attempt to hide the feelings around the problem, both to themselves and others. They have trouble asking for help, difficulty with receiving, poor boundaries. They are harsh on themselves, are hardcore believers in merit. They doubt choices internally. They achieve in life in order to be perfect. Often exaggerate with words such as never, always, and very. The greater the wound of injustice, the more unjust we will be towards other people and ourselves. We will ask too much of ourselves by not respecting our limits and not allowing ourselves to enjoy life. We yet again blame others for everything that we do ourselves, but don't want to see. That's why we attract people who reflect what we are doing, which will continue until we start to heal our core wound. There are so many teaching that talk about this, but with their own systems and wordings. For example, there is IFS, Integrated Family Systems, that says trauma occurs, a part of you at that age breaks away as a so-called exile and is then protected by a so-called protector. And all these multiple aspects of ourselves are triggered and reactive with a certain response in different situations. Within psychosynthesis, it's called subpersonalities. Either way, they all refer to the same thing. There is an action, a trauma or impactful happening that takes place where a wounding is created. There is a reaction, a response where your ego, protector, subpersonality steps in to protect or mask. And this protector works full time, I will tell you. It will be triggered and reactive to anything that is a threat to the exposure of the wounding. But what we often fail to see and recognize is that this protecting, this never ending defensive alert mode, is making us exhausted. It's not only making us exhausted, it's actually also creating more pain. To use another Gabor Mate quote, the attempt to escape from pain is what creates more pain. You're trying to outrun yourself, which is literally impossible. But the beautiful thing is this: once you just stop and take a look at yourself, your behaviors, your triggers, your wounds, once you just stop and take a look at your inner child that is hurting and start parenting that inner child in a way that it needed back then your healing journey starts and you'll be able to let go of these things that have a hold on you, that subconsciously run the show. Run your show without you even realizing. So, what does our inner child need? First of all, ask it. What do you need? Even though that might feel a bit weird, I can promise you that it won't answer, I need more responsibilities, I need more stress, I need more numbing, I need more shallow relationships, I need more materialistic things. It is rather going to express the need to be accepted for who it truly is, to be seen, to be loved, to be able to be in contact with and express its emotions, to be held, to have a space, to reconnect to nature and play, to have a deep and authentic connections with others, to be treated the way you would treat an actual child in front of you, or at least as we are supposed to treat our children. Now, reflect on how your childhood was. Now that you've heard more about different wounds, which of them seem to describe your caretakers, the situations around you growing up, and the behaviors and masks that you carry today? Reflect on and notice what situations trigger you in life. When does your nervous system react? You can also sit down and meditate on your childhood and see if specific situations are shown to you. If so, and strong emotions appear, try to hold your inner child, either by placing your hands on your heart or by actually putting your arms around yourself. Give your inner child words of affirmations such as, I love you just the way you are. You are safe now. You are worthy of love and happiness. I am here to listen and to understand. You and your feelings matter. These things can, in the beginning, be quite hard to do on your own. So I really recommend that you go to someone who can hold a safe space for you. It is also very healing to be witnessed in our process and in our hurt. Because once we're seen, even if we don't want to see it, or if we can't reach it ourselves, by being witnessed by someone else, we sometimes bypass the protection of the masks of the ego and go straight to the inner child. And remember that our ego isn't something bad. It's the thing that has protected us. But as with other less refined responses in our human body and brain, we need to take charge and thank our ego for protecting us this far, but we'll take it from here. Because until we do that, will continue on in survival mode that isn't allowing you to thrive. I also want to underline the fact that we're never supposed to get rid of the ego. That will never happen. We're humans, and the ego comes with the territory. That's why the wording ego death can sometimes be misleading. And the wording should maybe be masks of the ego death instead. We are actually just supposed to make the ego work in our favor in an involved way where masks aren't thriving, but rather authenticity and substance of what really matters to us. Okay, so now when you know that you have an inner child with a bunch of wounds and the stories and maybe even the actual situations connected to them, you know what masks and behaviors you carry, what situations trigger your ego to hold up the masks. Where do you go from here? You don't go anywhere. You stay where you are and you sit with it. Feel it. Feel it all. Where is it located in your body? What sensations and emotions are connected to it? When you're connected with it, go even deeper to the core of each wound. You don't have to understand what it's about or what it's connected to. Just feel it. At first, it might be really uncomfortable, but after a while, you'll notice that it isn't as bad as you thought. It doesn't kill you, it doesn't hurt you further. And if you really feel it unhindered, then it might actually loosen its grip, be released, and eventually healed. But you have to be brave enough to sit with it, to sit with the uncomfortable instead of running, instead of chasing all the things in a pursuit of fulfilling the mask's objectives. Isn't it time that you start chasing your own authentic desires, dreams, and fulfillment instead? In the beginning, when this doesn't come natural to you and your subconscious patterning needs some rerouting, it can also be a good idea to coach your inner child, aka yourself, or be coached by someone else during the process. Saying things like, I know this is painful to feel, to see, to embrace, but I got you now. You are allowed to and safe to feel it all. There's no shame in being you. There's no guilt to be held on to. There's no aspect of your authentic you that isn't divine and holy. There's no game to be played anymore. There's nothing to be accomplished but the pure joy of just being you and doing what lights you up. You can rest now. You are worthy of receiving love. You don't need to run or chase anymore. There's no one that can reject, abandon, betray, humiliate, or inflict injustice upon you but you. I love you. I honor you. My time as a victim is over. I take back my power from all the people I have given it away to throughout all times. I now choose me. I now choose my authentic self and release any and all burdens of the masks. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So be it, so be it, so be it. It is done. Because if the mind can't rest, you might as well use it to your benefit. And also, Remember to have compassion both for your inner child and your inner adult. This isn't an easy process or concept to wake up to when you lived your entire life, whether that is 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 plus years, in one way, with one outlook, one truth, which is the one that you were programmed to believe and see. Also, keep in mind that this whole process becomes much easier if you detach yourself from your caretakers a bit. This process isn't about placing blame or pointing fingers. This is about you taking accountability as an adult for your own well being. We all have been through things. We all have had things done to us, but holding on to them isn't helping you. This is about you becoming free of your own inner burdens. And with every wound, trauma, or masks of ego death that you identify or come across, remember this powerful statement: I am sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. Regardless if you know what it is about, it's a way to release. Throughout this process, it's also important to remember to ask for and to give yourself forgiveness. At the end of the day, regardless of how you ended up wounded, you have done a lot of things to yourself that maybe weren't in your best interest along the way. So forgiveness is needed all around. Maybe you should even write up a list of all the names that pop up when you ask yourself, who do I need to forgive? And when you look at that list, maybe there are some names sticking out as a I could never forgive this person kind of person. I have met people that have forgiven the most unspeakable things. If they can forgive, so can you. Last but not least, forgive God, forgive Source, forgive Universe, forgive whatever name you put on that greater than yourself essence that you cry out to when you are in despair and have lost all sense of hope, that thing you banish when you lose a loved one. And again, forgive yourself for ever doubting that essence has ever left you, because it has always been inside you. And again, a gentle reminder that the act of forgiveness is for ourselves. It allows us to no longer carry the weight of that burden that wasn't yours to begin with. It allows us to cut ourselves free from the bondages of victimhood. And beyond that, there is peace, self-love, abundance, happiness, orgasmic life force energy, and all the good things that life has to offer. Especially when you tune into the frequency of your healed inner child and allow your inner child to come out and play and not take everything so seriously all the time. Usually, when we grow up, we tend to forget how to play and just have fun and be goofy and silly and not care if we make a fool of ourselves in someone else's eyes. Screw that. Belly laughs for the win. As they say, or at least there's a Swedish saying that goes, a good laugh prolongs your life. With that said, hopefully this has given you some greater insight to otherwise potentially vague concepts like inner child healing and wounds. Hopefully this has given you a greater understanding and compassion for yourself, both your inner child and adult. Hopefully this has given you the kick in the butt needed to explore and understand what this process could entail, how much it affects your life and the quality of life, and the power you would take back once you've done it. Thank you for showing up for yourself by listening to this. Until next time.